I'd barely finished changing out of my bloodstained scrubs when I pushed through the heavy door of Rosso, desperate to escape the downpour that had turned Manhattan's streets into rivers. November had arrived with a vengeance, and I'd spent the last 12 hours at the emergency veterinary clinic trying to save a golden retriever that had been hit by a taxi. We lost him 20 minutes before my shift ended. The jeans and sweater I'd pulled on felt wrong somehow, too normal for a night where nothing felt normal. The warmth inside the Italian bar hit me like a wall, steam rising from my soaked burgundy jacket as I stood dripping on the polished hardwood floor. The place was nearly empty, just a handful of people scattered across the leather booths that lined the brick walls. Soft jazz played from speakers I couldn't see, mixing with the low murmur of conversation and the clink of glasses. I made my way to the bar, peeling off my jacket and draping it over the stool beside me. My fingers were still trembling slightly, the adrenaline from the failed surgery refusing to fade. 2 months in this city, 2 months since I'd left Boston, and a relationship that had slowly suffocated me, and I still wasn't used to the relentless pace of working in Manhattan. "What can I get you?" The bartender appeared, his white shirt crisp despite the late hour. He looked me over with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen everything. "Hot chocolate," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "With a shot of whiskey." He nodded once and disappeared. I pressed my palms against the cool mahogany of the bar, trying to ground myself. The golden retriever's owner had been a little girl, maybe 7 years old. The way she'd screamed when I came out to deliver the news would haunt me for weeks. My hand drifted to the small silver necklace at my throat, the tiny pendant shaped like half of a heart. I'd worn it every day for 15 years, a habit so ingrained I barely noticed it anymore. Sophia had given it to me the night before I was adopted, pressing the matching half into my palm with tears streaming down her face. "So you never forget me," she'd whispered. I never did forget, but I'd lost her anyway. The bartender returned with my drink in a ceramic mug, steam curling from the surface. I wrapped both hands around it, letting the heat seep into my skin. Through the window, I watched the storm continue its assault on the city, people rushing past with newspapers held over their heads, car horns blaring at the flooded intersections. I was halfway through my drink when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't dramatic, not at first, just a subtle change in the energy of the room, like the barometric pressure dropping before a tornado. The conversations at the nearby tables grew quieter. The bartender straightened, his casual demeanor replaced with something sharper, more alert. Then the door opened. 3 men entered, but only one commanded attention. He was tall, easily 6'3", with black hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Dark eyes, strong jaw, olive skin still holding summer's tan despite the winter chill. His charcoal suit fit him with the precision that came from custom tailoring, every line accentuating broad shoulders and a lean, powerful frame. But it wasn't his appearance that made my breath catch. It was the way everyone else reacted. The bartender moved immediately to pour something without being asked. The couple at the nearest booth fell silent mid-conversation. Even the jazz seemed to quiet, though I knew that was impossible. The man moved through the space with absolute confidence, flanked by his companions. One was tall and heavily built, his nose clearly broken more than once. The other was leaner, with cold eyes that swept the room in constant assessment. They were heading toward the private area at the back when the lean one spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. But the effect was immediate. The man in the charcoal suit stopped walking and turned, his gaze following the direction his companion indicated. Toward me. I froze, the mug halfway to my lips. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that felt physical, like being pinned by a spotlight. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, we stared at each other across the dim interior of the bar. Then his gaze dropped, traveling down to where I'd pushed up the sleeves of my dark gray sweater, to my left forearm, to the scar. His expression changed so completely, it was like watching a mask shatter. The casual confidence vanished, replaced by something sharp and dangerous. He was moving before I could process what was happening, crossing the distance between us with startling speed. "Let me see your arm." His voice was deep, smooth, with the barest trace of an Italian accent threading through his words. "Excuse me," I managed, setting down my mug with shaking hands. He didn't repeat himself. Instead, his hand shot out and gripped my wrist, not painfully but with unmistakable authority. He yanked my arm toward him, turning it so the inside of my forearm was exposed under the bar's lighting. The scar was old, faded to a pale pink line against my skin. 2 letters intertwined in a shape that could have been abstract art if you didn't know what you were looking at. A V inside another V, the lines crossing at specific points that had been carefully planned by 2 little girls with a piece of broken glass. Who are you? The man's grip tightened slightly, his eyes never leaving the scar. Where did you get this? My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Let go of me. Not until you answer my question. He looked up then, and I saw something in his face that made my stomach drop. Deep, aching pain hiding behind the anger. The bigger man had materialized behind me, blocking any escape route. The lean one stood to my right, his hand resting inside his jacket in a way that suggested a weapon. The other patrons had suddenly found reasons to look anywhere else, their drinks becoming fascinating. My name is Isabella Martinez, I said, forcing the words out past my tight throat. I'm a veterinarian. I work at East Side Animal Emergency. I've never seen you before in my life, and I have no idea why you care about an old scar. When did you get it? His thumb pressed against the scar, tracing one of the lines. How long ago? 15 years, I whispered. When I was 12. Now please, let go. His jaw tightened. Come with me. What? No, I'm not going anywhere with you people. It wasn't a request. He released my wrist, but only to gesture sharply toward the back of the bar. You can walk, or Vincent can carry you. Your choice. The bigger man, Vincent apparently, took a step closer. I looked at the bartender, hoping for some intervention, some help. He was studiously polishing a glass, his eyes fixed on his work. No one was going to help me. I was alone with these men who clearly operated outside normal rules, and refusing would only make things worse. Fine, I said, sliding off the stool. My legs felt unsteady, adrenaline flooding my system for the second time that night. But if you hurt me, I'm screaming. No one's going to hurt you, Miss Martinez. The man's voice had softened fractionally, though his expression remained granite. I just want to talk. He led the way toward a door I hadn't noticed before, tucked beside the bar. It opened onto a narrow hallway that smelled of aged wood and expensive cologne. Another door at the end, this one heavy oak with a brass handle. Inside was an office that spoke of serious money. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a massive desk that dominated the space. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked antique. A single lamp cast golden light across the desk's surface. The man gestured to one of the chairs facing the desk. I sat. Vincent took up position by the door, while the lean man disappeared back into the bar. The man in the charcoal suit moved behind the desk, opening a drawer. When he pulled out the photograph, my world tilted. It was old, faded around the edges, but the image was clear. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20, laughing at something off camera. Dark hair cascading over one shoulder, warm brown eyes crinkled with joy. And there, on her left forearm, clearly visible as she reached toward whoever held the camera, was a scar identical to mine. No, I breathed, my hand flying to my mouth. No, that's not possible. You recognize her. Another statement, not a question. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely, tears burning behind my eyes. Because I did recognize her. She was older in this photo, grown up and beautiful, but I would know that face anywhere. I'd memorized it during 4 years of sharing a cramped room in an underfunded orphanage, studying it in the dark when nightmares woke me, finding safety in her presence. Soph, I finally managed, the nickname tearing from my chest. That's Sophia. The man lowered himself slowly into his chair, his eyes never leaving my face. How do you know that name? She was my friend. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. My best friend. We were at Santa Agnes together, the orphanage in Chicago. From the time I was 8 until I got adopted at 12. We shared everything. We were like sisters. Tell me about the scar. I looked down at my arm, at the mark I'd carried for half my life. We made them the night before I left. We knew I was being adopted the next morning, and Soph, she didn't want us to forget each other. She said we needed something permanent, something that would always connect us. The memory crashed over me with painful clarity. Sophia's face in the dim light of the dormitory bathroom, tears streaming as she held the piece of broken glass from a shattered mirror. Her hands shaking as she made the first cut on her own arm, then on mine. both of us biting down on rolled washcloths to muffle our cries. The blood mixing as we pressed our arms together, making promises we were too young to understand. Forever sisters. The scars would fade but never disappear, like our bond. Except our bond had disappeared anyway, hadn't it? When the Collins family decided I was too damaged to love, when I went back into the system and Sophia stayed at Santa Agnes. I'd written letters that went unanswered, made phone calls that weren't returned. Eventually, I'd stopped trying. The man's voice cut through my memories. My name is Dante Romano. The photograph shows my wife. My dead wife. The words hit me like physical blows. Sophia was dead. My sister, my friend, the girl who'd carved her initial into my skin as a promise we'd never forget each other, was gone. When, I whispered, 3 years ago, she was investigating something when she died. Something dangerous that got her killed. Officially, it was a random mugging. Unofficially, I've spent every day since trying to find out who really killed her and why. The room spun. Murdered. She was investigating something when she died. Something dangerous. I never knew what. Never understood why she was so secretive in the months before. He looked up at me, and I saw grief etched into every line of his face. But now you walk into my bar with that scar, and suddenly I'm wondering if the answer was in her past all along. I don't know anything, I protested. I haven't seen her since I was 12 years old. I didn't even know she was alive, let alone that she'd married someone, that she'd died. Maybe not consciously. He stood, moving around the desk until he was standing directly in front of me. But you're the first real lead I've had in 3 years, Miss Martinez. Which means you're not leaving my sight until I know everything there is to know about Santa Agnes, about Sophia, and about why she kept you secret. You can't just keep me here. I own this bar. I own the building it's in. I own half of this neighborhood. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but utterly inflexible. My name is Dante Romano, and in this city, that name means something. So yes, Miss Martinez, I absolutely can keep you here until I get the answers I need. The question is whether you're going to cooperate or make this difficult. I stood to face him, anger cutting through my fear and grief. Soph was my friend. If someone killed her, I want to know who and why just as much as you do. So don't threaten me like I'm your enemy. For a long moment, we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then something shifted in his expression, a fractional softening around his eyes. You're right, he said finally. I apologize. This has been unexpected. For both of us. I touched the necklace at my throat again, drawing strength from it. What do you need from me? Everything you remember. Every detail about the orphanage, about Sophia, about what happened there. He returned to his chair, pulling out a legal pad and pen. And then we're going to figure out why my wife died, and make sure whoever's responsible pays for it. I sat back down, my wet clothes leaving damp patches on the leather. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside this office, a different kind of storm was beginning. One that had been brewing for 15 years, waiting for two old friends' paths to cross again. Even if one of them was already dead. The apartment Dante Romano provided wasn't a prison cell, but it might as well have been. Located on the 14th floor of a building I'd never noticed despite working blocks away. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River, hardwood floors that gleamed under recessed lighting, and furniture that screamed money in quiet, understated tones. A king bed dominated the bedroom, its white linens so crisp they looked almost hostile. The refrigerator was stocked with food I couldn't pronounce, the bathroom filled with products that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. It was beautiful, luxurious, and completely foreign to everything I knew. Vincent had escorted me here after my 4-hour interrogation session with Dante, during which I'd emptied my memory of every detail I could recall about Santa Agnes, about Sophia, about the children who'd disappeared in the middle of the night and were never discussed again. Now Vincent stood by the door, polite but immovable, while I tried to process the fact that my childhood friend was dead and I was essentially being held prisoner by her widower. She'd lived an entire life I knew nothing about. Married a man who clearly adored her, if the grief carved into his features was any indication. Moved through a world of wealth and privilege so far removed from Santa Agnes, it might as well have been another planet. And apparently, she'd never mentioned me once. That hurt worse than I wanted to admit. On the afternoon of the third day, Dante arrived with 2 other men I didn't recognize. They wore dark suits and carried leather briefcases, their expressions professionally neutral. Lawyers, I guessed, or investigators. They set up in the apartment's dining area, spreading documents across the glass table. Dante gestured me over without greeting. I need you to verify some information. I sat, my jaw tight. Good afternoon to you too. His eyes flicked to mine briefly. Good afternoon, Miss Martinez. Now, please verify this information. The first document was my adoption record, somehow obtained despite privacy laws. I scanned it, recognizing my younger self's signature at the bottom, the careful loops I'd practiced for weeks before signing. Thomas and Patricia Collins, approved adoptive parents. Date of adoption, March 15th, the year I turned 12. That's accurate, I said. Tell me about them. The Collins family. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms. They seemed nice at first. Patricia baked cookies, Thomas coached Little League. They had a house in Brookline with a backyard and a dog named Chester. They wanted a daughter to complete their perfect family picture. What went wrong? The question landed like a punch. I'd spent years in therapy dissecting exactly what went wrong, understanding that it wasn't my fault, that I'd been a traumatized kid with behavioral issues stemming from institutionalization. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. I had nightmares, I said quietly. Screaming nightmares that woke the whole house. I hoarded food in my room because I was terrified there wouldn't be enough. I couldn't stand being touched without warning, which made Patricia cry because she wanted to be an affectionate mother. I got into fights at school when kids made fun of my secondhand clothes. Dante's expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had softened fractionally. After 2 years, they sat me down and explained very calmly that they'd made a mistake, that they weren't equipped to handle a child with my level of need, that it would be better for everyone if I returned to state care. I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve. They were probably right. I was miserable there, trying to be someone I wasn't, but it still felt like being thrown away twice. One of the investigators made a note. Dante didn't move. Where did you go after? Back into the system. Foster homes, mostly. Some were okay, some were terrible, all were temporary. I learned to keep my head down, not get attached. Age out at 18 and put myself through college, then veterinary school. Dead up to my eyeballs, but I made it work. The investigator slid another document across the table. Sophia's file. Her real file, not the sanitized version they gave adoptive families. Pages and pages of assessments, incident reports, medical records. A paper trail of a child trying to survive in a system that saw her as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be protected. I read through it with growing horror. Suspected abuse in her original home. Multiple placements that failed. Behavioral issues including, according to one particularly clinical report, excessive attachment to younger children in the facility, specifically one Isabella Martinez. She was trying to protect me, I realized, scanning a report from when I was 9. There was an incident with one of the older boys, a kid who'd been picking on me. Sophia had stepped in, and according to this report, she'd been written up for aggression. But she'd never told me that was the reason she'd been sent to the isolation room for 3 days. She just said she'd mouthed off to a counselor. I looked up at Dante. She never got adopted. No. The investigator spoke for the first time. She aged out of the system at 18. Worked her way through college, became a teacher. Met Mr. Romano when she was 24. They were married for 6 years. What was she like? I asked. As an adult, I mean. What kind of person had she become? Dante was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice softer than I'd heard it. She was fearless, not reckless, but completely unafraid to do what was right, even when it was dangerous. She worked with at-risk kids, the ones everyone else had given up on. Brought them to our home sometimes, gave them a place to feel safe. She said she remembered what it was like to be powerless, to be invisible. She never wanted another child to feel that way. Tears spilled down my cheeks. That sounded like Sophia. Even as children, she'd been the one to comfort scared newcomers, to stand up to bullies, to make sure the younger kids got their fair share at mealtimes. What was she investigating when she died? That's what we're trying to figure out, the second investigator said. The police found no evidence at the scene, no witnesses, no security footage. But in the months before her death, she'd been asking questions, contacting people from her past, including staff members from Santa Agnes. Most of them refused to talk to her. Those who did said she was looking for information about children who'd been moved from the facility, transferred, was the official term. But no records exist of where they went. I felt cold despite the apartment's warmth. How many children? The investigator consulted his notes. At least 30 over the facility's 13-year operation. Possibly more. Children who were in the system one day, gone the next. No forwarding information, no follow-up reports, no documentation of where they ended up. That's not normal, I said. Even in a broken system, there are procedures. Transfer orders, court approvals, something. There should have been something. Exactly. Which is why your wife started investigating. And why someone killed her to stop her. Dante's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Conversations happened in fragments. Over breakfast, I told him about veterinary school, how I'd worked 3 jobs to afford it even with scholarships. How the first time I successfully performed surgery on a dog hit by a car, I'd cried for an hour afterward, overwhelmed by the responsibility of holding life in my hands. He told me about meeting Sophia at a business dinner, how she'd been seated beside him by her father, an associate looking to strengthen ties. How she'd spent the entire meal asking him questions about legitimate aspects of his businesses, pointedly ignoring the unspoken understanding of what else he controlled. She wasn't impressed by power, Dante said, his fingers tracing patterns on his coffee cup. She wanted to know what I actually did with it, whether I used it to help people or just to acquire more power. I'd never been asked that before. Most people either fear me or want something from me. She just wanted to understand me. When did you know you loved her? 3 months later. She'd started working as a teacher's aide at an elementary school in the Bronx. Rough neighborhood, kids with difficult lives. She invited me to come see the classroom she'd set up with her own money, bought books and supplies because the school couldn't afford them. I watched her with those kids, how gentle she was, how patient. And I knew I'd never let her go. But it was arranged initially. Her father suggested we meet. We both knew what that meant. But what we built was real, Isabella. Every day of those 6 years was real. The investigation continued around us. Dante received constant updates from his people. Castellano had gone to ground after the failed attack on the clinic, his usual haunts abandoned, his phones disconnected. But he couldn't disappear completely, not someone with his business interests and public profile. On the 4th night, Dante called me into his study. Documents covered every surface, his laptop showing what looked like banking records. My people found something. Sophia's lawyer, the one she consulted about bringing evidence to the FBI, kept copies of everything she gave him, including this. He turned the laptop toward me. I saw scanned documents, official-looking forms with government seals, birth certificates, adoption papers, medical records, all from Santa Agnes Home for Children. This is a safe deposit box, Dante explained. Sophia rented it under a false name 2 months before she died. The lawyer had a key, held in escrow to be delivered to law enforcement if anything happened to her. But he never came forward after her death. Why not? He died. Car accident, 6 weeks after Sophia. Officially ruled an accident, but the timing is suspicious. Dante pulled up another file. His firm kept the box rental information in their files. It took my people this long to find it and get access to the bank records. What's in the box? I don't know yet. But according to the rental agreement, Sophia designated one person besides herself who could access it. He pulled up a document, and I saw my name. Isabella Martinez. Pre-authorized accessor. Biometric data on file as of March 2020. That's a year before she died, I whispered. She registered me a year before, which means she knew she might die, was planning for that possibility, and she wanted you to be able to access whatever she'd hidden. Dante closed the laptop. The bank is in Connecticut, about 2 hours from here. We can go tomorrow if you're ready. I thought about Soph, my scared little friend who'd grown into a woman brave enough to investigate a human trafficking ring, who'd kept me secret to protect me, but had also made sure I could access her evidence if the worst happened. She'd never forgotten me. Not really. She'd just loved me enough to keep me far away from the danger she was walking into. I'm ready, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of the bedroom I'd claimed, watching the lake shimmer under moonlight. Tomorrow I'd learn what Soph had been hiding, what she deemed important enough to die protecting. And somehow, I'd have to find the strength to continue what she'd started. The drive to Connecticut took longer than expected. Morning traffic clogged the highways leading out of the city, giving me too much time to think about what we might find in Sophia's safe deposit box. Dante sat beside me in the back seat. working on his laptop, but I caught him glancing at me more than once. The tension between us had shifted over the past week at the lodge. It wasn't just the shared purpose anymore, the mutual need for justice. Something else hummed beneath the surface, charged and dangerous in its own way. I'd catch myself watching him when he thought I wasn't looking, noticing details I had no business noticing. The way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated. How his voice softened when he spoke about Sophia. The careful way he moved around me, always aware of where I was, making sure I felt safe. It was becoming harder to remember that this man was dangerous, that his world was built on violence and control, even if he wielded those tools for what he believed were righteous reasons. "You're quiet," Dante said, closing his laptop. "Nervous," I admitted. "Whatever Soph put in that box, she died to protect it. Then we'll make sure her sacrifice meant something." The bank was in a wealthy suburb, the kind of place where money whispered rather than shouted. Classical architecture, marble floors, and staff who moved with practiced discretion. Dante gave them my name, and within minutes we were escorted to a private room lined with safe deposit boxes. The manager, an older woman with kind eyes, verified my identification against their records. "You were registered as an authorized accessor in March of 2020, she confirmed. "Box 447. Your biometric scan matches our files perfectly." My hand shook slightly as I placed my palm on the scanner. The system beeped, a green light flashed, and the manager retrieved a long metal box from the wall. She set it on the table between Dante and me. "I'll give you privacy," she said, excusing herself. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The box sat there, innocuous and terrifying. The last message from a woman who'd been murdered for what she knew. "Do you want me to open it?" Dante asked quietly. I reached for the latch. "This is from Soph to me. I need to do it." Inside, nestled in protective cloth, was a laptop, several thumb drives, a stack of folders bound with rubber bands, and a silver necklace with a pendant identical to mine. I lifted it carefully, the chains sliding through my fingers. "She kept hers," I whispered. "All these years, she kept it." Dante's expression softened in a way I'd never seen before. "She never forgot you, Isabella. That much is clear." I fastened the necklace around my neck beside my own, feeling the weight of both pendants resting against my collarbone. Two halves of a heart, reunited after 15 years. The laptop powered on, and after a moment, it prompted for a password. I stared at the blank field, my mind racing. What would Soph have used? Something only someone from our past would know. Then it hit me. Our birthday. Not our real birthdays, which we'd celebrated on random days assigned by social services. But the birthday we'd chosen for ourselves. The day we'd made our blood oath and became sisters in everything but name. March 15th. I typed the date, holding my breath. The screen unlocked. "How did you know?" Dante asked. "It was our shared birthday. The day we became family." I navigated to the documents folder, finding files organized by year and category. She left everything. For the next hour, we poured through the evidence. Lists of children, some with photos attached. Sarah, age 7, lisp, sold to a family in Germany for $40,000. Marcus, age 14, good with mechanics, sent to a factory in Thailand. Dozens of names, dozens of children I'd known or heard about, all reduced to transactions with price tags. The financial records showed the full scope of the operation. Hope Foundation had facilitated over 200 illegal adoptions between 1995 and 2005, generating millions in revenue. The money had been laundered through various businesses, including several owned by organized crime families. "Look at this list of clients," Dante said grimly, pointing to a spreadsheet. 3 judges, a state senator, 2 FBI agents, and at least 5 major crime figures, including members of the Albanian organization that's been trying to move into my territory for years. They all used Castellano's services, either for themselves or as a way to launder money. Child trafficking is lucrative, and it's harder to trace than drugs or weapons. His face had gone hard. This is why Sophia died. Too many powerful people with too much to lose. I clicked on a folder labeled Personal Elena. Inside were video files, dated from the last few months of Sophia's life. I opened the first one. Soph's face filled the screen, older than in my memories, but unmistakably her. Same dark eyes, same determined expression. "My name is Sofia Romano," she said to the camera. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. Isabella, if it's you, I'm sorry. I never reached out. Sorry I kept you in the dark. But I needed you safe, and the only way to do that was to keep you far away from this investigation. Tears blurred my vision. Dante's hand found mine under the table, his grip warm and steady. I discovered something 6 months ago, Soph continued on screen. Records showing that I had a younger sister. Her name was Elena. She was 3 years old when child services separated us. I don't remember her at all, but the documents don't lie. She was placed in Santa Agnes with me for 2 weeks, then she disappeared from the system completely. She paused, wiping her own eyes. I traced her through Castellano's records. She was sold, like merchandise, to a family named Moreau in Lyon, France. She was 5 years old. They paid $50,000 for her. My God, I breathed. Soph had highlighted sections, made notes in the margins. Moreau family legitimate. Check background. Elena would be 32 now. Lyon address still current. My sister had been so close to finding her. If she'd lived just a few more months, she might have succeeded. Dante found me crying over the documents that evening. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and waited until I could speak. We need to find her, I said, my voice raw. Elena, we need to finish what Soph started. That could be dangerous. Expanding the investigation internationally brings complications. I don't care. I turned to face him, gripping his arm. Soph died trying to find her sister. The least we can do is complete her mission. Don't you want to meet your sister-in-law? Don't you want to know if she's okay? Something shifted in his expression. I'll make some calls. Within hours, Dante had mobilized contacts across Europe. His reach extended further than I'd imagined, connecting with people in France who could track down a 32-year-old woman with minimal information. It should have disturbed me how easily he commanded such resources. Instead, I felt grateful. While his investigators worked, the tension between us grew unbearable. We moved around each other carefully, maintaining physical distance while the air crackled with unspoken words. I'd catch him watching me from across a room, his expression unguarded for just a moment before he looked away. At night, I lay awake knowing he was one floor below, probably also unable to sleep. I was falling for him. The realization hit me during breakfast on the 5th day, watching him read through reports while absently pushing eggs around his plate. He'd barely eaten since we found the evidence, consumed by the same obsession that had driven Soph. But unlike Soph, he wasn't alone. He had me, whether he fully acknowledged it or not. The problem was admitting I was falling men accepting everything that came with Dante Romano. His world, his choices, his past and future. I'd spent years building walls around myself, protecting against the pain of abandonment and rejection. Letting him in meant demolishing those walls completely. A week after we'd started the search, Dante's investigator called with results. We sat together in his study while he put the call on speaker. Found her, the woman's accented voice announced. Elena Moreau, 32 years old, currently residing in Paris. She's an elementary school teacher at Saint Michel Primary School in the 15th district. Never married. Lives alone in a small apartment near the school. Background on the adoptive family. Henri Moreau died in 2015, heart attack. Claire Moreau still alive, living in a care facility in Lyon with advanced Alzheimer's. They were legitimate professionals, no criminal record. By all accounts, they treated Elena well. She visits her mother monthly. Relief washed through me. At least Soph's sister had ended up in a loving home, despite the horrific circumstances of her adoption. Does she know about how she was adopted? Unknown. Her birth records list the Moreaus as her biological parents. If she suspects anything, she's never pursued it officially. After the call ended, I turned to Dante. I need to go to Paris. I need to tell her in person. Isabella, this isn't negotiable. Soph left me that message specifically asking me to find Elena and tell her the truth. I'm not doing that over a phone call or through an intermediary. I stood, pacing the study. She deserves to know she had a sister who loved her, who died trying to find her. Dante studied me for a long moment. Then I'm coming with you. For security. Fine. 2 days later, we landed in Paris. The city spread beneath us as we descended, beautiful and ancient and completely overwhelming. I'd never been to Europe, never traveled much beyond the East Coast. Now I was about to shatter a woman's entire understanding of her own history. Dante had arranged everything with his typical efficiency. A car waited at the airport, a hotel suite overlooking the Seine. Contacts who confirmed Elena's schedule and habits. She spent Saturday mornings at a cafe near her apartment, grading papers and reading. That's where I found her. The cafe was tucked into a quiet street in the 15th district, small tables spilling onto the sidewalk despite the November chill. I spotted Elena immediately. She sat near the window, dark hair pulled into a casual bun, wearing a cream-colored sweater and jeans. Her face was partially obscured by the laptop in front of her, but when she looked up to take a sip of coffee, I saw a soft in her features. The same warm brown eyes, the same shape to her mouth. My sister's sister. Dante waited across the street, giving me space but close enough to intervene if needed. I approached her table slowly, my heart hammering. "Excuse me," I started carefully. "Are you Elena Moreau?" She looked up, surprised. "Do I know you?" "No, but I need to talk to you about something important. May I sit?" Wariness crossed her face, but she gestured to the empty chair. "All right." I sat, placing the folder I'd brought on the table between us. Inside were photos of Sophia, documents from Santa Agnes, copies of the adoption papers. Evidence carefully selected to tell a story without completely destroying her. "My name is Isabella Martinez. I know this is going to sound strange, but I knew your sister. Your biological sister, Sophia." Elena's face went completely still. "I don't have a sister. I'm an only child. That's what you were told. But it's not true." I opened the folder, pulling out a photo of Sophia at age 4 or 5, standing in front of the orphanage. "This is Sophia Marino. She was your sister. You were both placed in Santa Agnes Home for Children in Chicago when you were very young. She was older, about 6. You were only 3. This is ridiculous." But Elena's hands were shaking as she reached for the photo. "Who sent you? What kind of sick joke is this?" "It's not a joke. I wish it were." I pulled out the adoption papers next, the ones showing her sale to the Moreau family. "You were separated when you were 5. Your adoptive parents paid $50,000 through an organization that was trafficking children internationally. They may not have known it was illegal. They may have believed they were going through legitimate channels. But the truth is you were stolen from your sister and sold." Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're insane. I need you to leave. Please, just look at this." I pulled out my laptop, the one containing Sophia's videos. "Your sister spent the last months of her life trying to find you. She was murdered 3 years ago because of it. The least you can do is watch what she wanted to say to you." Something in my voice must have convinced her. She sat back down slowly, her eyes never leaving my face. "By the people running the trafficking operation." She got too close to the truth. I turned the laptop toward her and pressed play on the video file labeled for Elena. Soph's face filled the screen. Elena gasped, one hand flying to her mouth. "My name is Sophia Marino," Soph said from the recording. "If you're watching this, then you're my sister Elena, and someone finally found you. I'm so sorry it took so long. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you myself." Tears streamed down Elena's face as Soph continued, describing fragmented memories of a baby sister. A toddler who laughed constantly. A little girl taken away in the middle of the night, while Sophia screamed and fought the adults holding her back. "I never forgot you," Soph said. "Even when I couldn't remember your face, I knew something was missing. Someone was missing." When the video ended, Elena was sobbing. She looked at me with eyes identical to Sophia's, searching for answers I wasn't sure I could give. "Is she really dead?" "Yes. But she left evidence. Enough to destroy the people who stole you, who sold you, who killed her. We're going to make sure they pay for what they did. And we're going to make sure no other child suffers the way you and Sophia suffered." Elena wiped her face with shaking hands. "I want to help. That's not necessary. You have a life here, a good life." "No." Her voice was stronger now, carrying an echo of the determination I remembered in Sophia. "They took my sister from me. They stole my childhood, my identity, my family. I want to help destroy them. And I want to know everything about Sophia. Everything she was, everything she became. Tell me about my sister." So I did. I told her about the brave woman Sophia had become, about her marriage to Dante, about her work with children, about the investigation that had cost her life. I told her about the scared little girl I'd known at Santa Agnes, who'd protected younger children and carved matching scars into our arms so we'd never forget each other. Elena listened to every word, occasionally asking questions, her grief transforming gradually into something harder, more focused. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I have vacation days saved up, she said finally. How soon can we leave for New York? That night in our hotel suite, I called Dante into the sitting room where I'd been researching flights back to the States. Elena had insisted on immediate travel, wanting to see where Sophia had lived, to meet the man who'd loved her sister, to be part of bringing down the organization that had destroyed their family. She'll be in danger, I said without preamble. Castellano's people are still out there. If they realize Elena exists, if they discover she has access to Sophia's evidence, they won't get near her, Dante said firmly. I'll assign a protection detail. Same level as yours. She's family now. Family. The word hung in the air between us. Elena was Sophia's sister, which made her Dante's family by marriage. But what was I? What were we to each other? His expression suggested he was thinking the same thing. Isabella. The way he said my name made my breath catch. Yes. Come here. I stood, moving to where he sat on the couch. He caught my hand, pulling me down beside him. We need to talk about what happens after. After we find Castellano. After we finish what Sophia started. I don't know what you mean. You know exactly what I mean. His thumb traced across my knuckles. This thing between us. This connection we've been pretending doesn't exist. I pulled my hand away, standing to pace to the window. I can't do this, Dante. Your world, your life, it's not for me. Why? Because I could love you. The words came out in a rush, honest and terrifying. Because I could fall so completely for you that I'd lose myself, and I've worked too hard to build a life that's mine to give it up now. Even for you. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't respond. Then he stood, moving to join me at the window. You think loving me means losing yourself. I think loving you means entering a world where people get killed for asking questions, where children are trafficked and evidence disappears, and anyone who threatens the wrong person ends up dead. I think loving you means constantly looking over my shoulder, never knowing if today is the day someone decides I'm a liability. But you're already looking over your shoulder, Isabella. Castellano wants you dead whether you love me or not. The difference is, if you push me away, you'll face that threat alone. That's not fair. No, it's not. Nothing about this situation is fair. Sophia's death wasn't fair. What happened to you and Elena as children wasn't fair. But we don't get to choose our circumstances. We only get to choose how we respond to them. He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I'm choosing you, Isabella. I'm choosing to love you despite the danger, despite the complications, despite every logical reason why this is impossible. The question is what you're choosing. I looked out at the Paris skyline, glittering with thousands of lights. Each one represented lives being lived, choices being made, people finding ways to love each other despite impossible odds. I'd spent 15 years building walls around my heart, protecting myself from the pain of abandonment. But walls that kept out pain also kept out joy. And Sophia, brave Sophia who died fighting for justice, would have told me that life was too short to waste on fear. I turned to face him. I choose you too. The words were barely a whisper, but they might as well have been shouted. Dante's entire expression transformed, relief and desire and something deeper flooding his features. When he kissed me, it was with the desperate hunger of two people who'd been circling each other for weeks, holding back their feelings until the dam finally burst. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This was madness, choosing love in the middle of chaos, building something beautiful while the world burned around us. But maybe that's when love mattered most. When everything else was uncertain, when the future was a question mark, when all you had was this moment and this person and this choice. When we finally broke apart, breathless, Dante rested his forehead against mine. No matter what comes next, Isabella, we face it together. Promise me. I promise. And for the first time since walking into that bar 2 weeks ago, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. Not because the danger was over, because it wasn't. Not because our path would be easy, because it wouldn't. But because I was no longer facing it alone. Sophia had died alone, investigating a conspiracy that threatened powerful people, with only her own courage for protection. I wouldn't make the same mistake. Whatever came next, Dante and I would face it together. 3 weeks after our return from Paris, I stood in the same veterinary clinic where Castellano's men had nearly killed me, watching contractors install reinforced windows and a new security system. Elena sat at the reception desk, going through patient files, having thrown herself into helping me rebuild the practice with the same intensity she brought to everything. She'd taken an extended leave from her teaching job in Paris, claiming she needed time to explore her American heritage. In reality, she was helping us compile evidence against the trafficking network, using her fluency in French and her elementary education background to interview survivors we'd located across Europe. The night shift at East Side Animal Emergency was usually quiet, just me and Dr. Patel handling the occasional emergency that couldn't wait until morning. Alessandro stood his usual post near the reception desk, pretending to read a magazine while actually scanning every person who walked through the door. I'd gotten used to his presence over the past week, the way shadows had become part of my daily existence. I was finishing paperwork on a cat with kidney failure when the bell above the door chimed. A man entered carrying a medium-sized dog wrapped in a blanket, his face twisted with apparent concern. "Please, you have to help him," the man said, his accent thick, Eastern European maybe. "He was hit by car. He's bleeding." Patel was in surgery with another case. I moved around the counter immediately, my training overriding everything else. "Bring him to examination room 2. Let me see." Alessandro shifted position, his hand moving inside his jacket, but the man seemed genuinely distraught. The dog whimpered convincingly as we entered the exam room. I gestured to the table. "Set him down gently." "What's his name?" "Bruno." The man laid the dog on the examination table, the blanket falling away to reveal a German Shepherd mix with what looked like road rash along his side. I pulled on latex gloves, approaching carefully. The dog's eyes were alert, watching me, and something about the situation felt wrong. Dogs in genuine distress didn't track movement that clearly. But my hands were already reaching for him, checking his gums, feeling for broken bones. That's when the door burst open behind me. 2 more men rushed in, and I saw the guns before my brain could process what was happening. The first man grabbed my arm, yanking me backward, his grip bruising. I opened my mouth to scream, and he clamped his other hand over it. "Quiet," he hissed. "Come with us, no trouble." The door to the exam room exploded inward. Alessandro came through it like a force of nature, his own weapon drawn. He fired twice, the sound deafening in the small space. I felt rather than saw the first man drop, his grip on me releasing as he fell. More gunfire erupted from the lobby. Glass shattered. Someone was screaming, maybe me, maybe the receptionist who'd been at the front desk. I dropped to the floor, crawling behind the examination table, my hands slick with blood that wasn't mine. The dog, I realized distantly, had jumped off the table and disappeared. Not injured at all. Just bait. They'd used the dog as bait to get to me. More men poured through the clinic's entrance. I heard Vincent's voice shouting orders, then the distinctive sound of automatic weapons. The examination room window exploded, raining glass across my back. I curled into a ball, making myself as small as possible, pressed against the base of the cabinets where I kept surgical supplies. Someone stepped into the room. I saw boots, expensive leather, moving through the debris. My heart stopped. Then I heard Dante's voice, cold and lethal. "Where is she?" Behind the table, Alessandro called back, his voice strained. "She's clear." Strong hands pulled me up. Dante's face swam into focus, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. Blood spattered his white shirt, though I couldn't tell if it was his. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over my arms, my shoulders, checking for injuries with clinical efficiency. "I don't think so." My voice sounded strange, distant. The dog wasn't really hurt. They used him to get me close. "I know." He pulled me against his chest, one arm wrapped around me protectively while his other hand held his weapon. "We're leaving." The clinic was destroyed. Bullet holes pocked the walls, the waiting room chairs were overturned, and blood stained the linoleum in spreading pools. 2 bodies laying near the entrance, neither of them Vincent or Alessandro, thank God. The receptionist huddled behind the desk, crying but apparently unharmed. "Police are coming," Vincent said, appearing at Dante's shoulder. "We need to be gone before they arrive." Dante didn't argue. He half-carried me through the side entrance where an SUV waited, engine running. Vincent drove while Dante kept me pinned against him in the back seat, his body a shield between me and the windows. We drove north, leaving the city's lights behind. My ears still rang from the gunfire, my hands shaking violently now that the adrenaline was fading. I couldn't stop seeing that moment when the man grabbed me, couldn't stop feeling his hand over my mouth. They knew where I worked, I said finally, my voice hollow. You said I'd be protected. You said I'd be safe. I was wrong. Dante's jaw was tight, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. They moved faster than I anticipated. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word came out sharp, anger cutting through the fear. You used me as bait. You dangled me in front of Castellano like I was nothing, and now people are dead. That clinic, those animals. Dr. Patel was in surgery when this happened. He's fine. Vincent confirmed it before we left. That's not the point. I shoved away from him, pressing myself against the opposite door. The point is you knew this would happen. You knew showing me to Castellano would put a target on my back, and you did it anyway. Yes. He didn't try to deny it, didn't offer excuses. I gambled with your safety because I needed to confirm he recognized you, that he saw you as a threat. I was right, but I underestimated how quickly he'd move to eliminate that threat. So what now? How many more times do I almost die before you get your revenge? This isn't about revenge. For the first time since I'd met him, Dante's control cracked. This is about justice for a woman who died trying to protect children from monsters. This is about making sure the people who killed her can't hurt anyone else. And yes, I used you. I won't apologize for that. But I won't let them take you the way they took her. The vehemence in his voice startled me into silence. We drove for another hour, the city giving way to suburbs, then to rural darkness punctuated by occasional farmhouses. Finally, Vincent turned down a private road marked only by a small stone pillar. The house appeared gradually through the trees, a sprawling structure of wood and stone that looked more like a lodge than a residence. Security lights illuminated the driveway, and I saw at least 3 other men positioned around the property perimeter. Dante helped me out of the SUV, his hand gentle now where it had been commanding before. You'll be safe here. I own the property through several shell companies. No one outside my inner circle knows it exists. Inside, the house was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Wood beam ceilings soared overhead. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and leather furniture was arranged to take advantage of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a dark lake. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. There are bedrooms upstairs, Dante said. Choose whichever you like. You'll find clothes in the closets, all sizes. Bathroom is stocked. Kitchen is fully supplied. Another gilded cage. I moved to the windows, staring out at my reflection. Behind me, Dante stood with his hands in his pockets, blood still staining his shirt. I failed her. The words came out quietly, almost too soft to hear. Sophia. She was investigating something dangerous, and I was too focused on business to notice. Too confident that my reputation would protect her. When she died, when I found her in that alley, I swore I'd never fail like that again. I turned to face him. His mask had completely dropped, leaving only raw pain visible in his features. Every day for 3 years, I've lived with the knowledge that I could have saved her if I'd just paid attention. If I'd asked the right questions, noticed her withdrawing, pushed past her deflections. She died alone, Isabella. Died protecting me from whatever she discovered, and I let it happen. My anger drained away, replaced by something more complicated. You couldn't have known. I should have. He moved to the fireplace, bracing his hands against the mantel. I knew Castellano would see you as a threat. I knew he'd act. I thought I had more time, thought I could control the situation better. I thought I was smarter than I turned out to be. What would Sophia want? I asked quietly. If she were here now, knowing what we know, what would she want us to do? He was quiet for a long moment. She'd want us to finish it. To make sure every child in those files gets justice, that every person involved in the trafficking operation pays for what they did. She'd want us to honor the memory of all the children who didn't survive by protecting the ones who did. Then that's what we do. I moved to stand beside him at the fireplace. But we do it together. No more secrets, no more using each other as bait. We're partners in this, or I walk away right now. His eyes met mine in the flickering firelight. Partners. He held out his hand. I shook it, sealing our agreement. Then he pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me with desperate tenderness. I'm sorry, Isabella. For everything. For putting you in danger, for not protecting you better, for failing Sophia. I won't fail again. You didn't fail her, I said into his chest. She made her own choices, fought her own fight. You can't save people who don't want to be saved, and you can't protect people who choose to walk into danger. All you can do is stand beside them when they need you. The way you're standing beside me now. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the warm glow of the fire, planning our next move against the people who'd killed Sophia and stolen Elena's childhood. Outside, the lake reflected starlight, peaceful and serene. But inside the lodge, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of tragedy were preparing for war. When Dante's phone rang at 6 in the morning, I knew it was bad news before he answered. His expression grew grimmer with each word from the caller, and when he hung up, his face was carved from granite. Castellano's dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. That's good news, isn't it? The threat's eliminated. It would be, except he didn't die from natural causes. Dante pulled up something on his computer, turned the monitor so I could see. Grainy security footage showed a man slumped in a chair, blood pooling beneath him. He was executed. Professional hit, clean and efficient. 2 days ago in Prague. Who killed him? That's the question. Dante's jaw was tight because whoever did it left a calling card. He zoomed in on the image. On the wall behind Castellano's body, someone had spray-painted a symbol, a crown over crossed swords. What does it mean? It's the mark of the Bellini family. Italian organized crime based in Naples, but with operations throughout Europe. Dante rubbed his face tiredly. They're old school, powerful, and they don't make moves without strategic purpose. Why would they kill Castellano? That's what I need to figure out. He looked at Alessandro. Has there been any communication? Nothing direct, but word on the street is the Bellinis are consolidating territory. They've been moving against Russian interests across Europe for the past 6 months. And now they've made a statement by taking out one of the most connected Russian operators in the game. Dante's voice was grim. But it also means they know about our investigation. Know about you, Isabella. Know about Elena. Killing Castellano sends a message, but it doesn't end our pursuit of justice. If anything, it complicates things. How so? Because now we have to figure out whether the Bellinis killed him to help us or to silence him before he could reveal information that would implicate them. Elena appeared in the doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. She'd been staying in one of the upstairs bedrooms, throwing herself into the investigation with the same intensity she brought to teaching. What's happening? I could hear voices. Dante explained the situation while Elena listened with growing alarm. Her connection to the trafficking ring made her just as much a target as I was, maybe more so given her direct blood relationship to Sophia. So what's our next move? Elena asked when he finished. We go to ground completely. Dante was already making mental calculations. I have a place in the mountains, completely off-grid. We take the evidence, continue working remotely, stay hidden until we can figure out the Bellini's angle. I don't want to hide, I said firmly. Sophia didn't hide when things got dangerous. She kept fighting until the very end. If we disappear now, we're abandoning every other victim of this trafficking ring. We're letting the people responsible get away with destroying children's lives. Isabella's right, Elena added. My sister died to expose these monsters. I won't dishonor her memory by running away when the fight gets difficult. Both women stared at Dante with identical expressions of determination. He looked between us, clearly warring between his protective instincts and his respect for our choices. You're both civilians, he said finally. I'm trained for this kind of conflict. You're not. Then train us, I shot back. Teach us what we need to know to stay alive while we finish this. Because I'm not backing down, Dante. With or without your help, Elena and I are going to see this through. Something shifted in his expression as he recognized the futility of arguing with us. The same stubborn courage that had gotten Sophia killed was alive in both of us, and no amount of logic would dissuade us from our path. Fine, he said at last. But we do this my way. Total operational security, no unauthorized risks, and you follow my orders without question when things get dangerous. Can you live with that? Yes, Elena and I said in unison. Dante's phone rang again. This time when he answered, his expression grew thoughtful rather than grim. When he hung up, he turned to us with something that might have been optimism. That was Agent Mitchell, FBI. She wants to meet. Says she has information about the Bellini connection to the trafficking ring, and a proposal for how we might be able to work together. Where? Neutral ground. A diner in Queens, 2 hours from now. She'll come alone, but she wants all 3 of us there. Elena, Isabella, and me. Why all three of us? Because according to Mitchell, the Bellinis didn't kill Castellano to silence him. They killed him because he was planning to eliminate the witnesses to his trafficking operation. Starting with you two. They saved your lives, Isabella. And now they want something in return. The diner was exactly what I'd expected from Dante's description. Formica tables, cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Agent Mitchell sat in a corner booth with her back to the wall, wearing jeans and a sweater rather than her usual FBI attire. She looked like any other patron, except for the way her eyes constantly scanned the room and the bulge under her left arm that suggested a shoulder holster. "Thank you for coming," she said as we slid into the booth across from her. "Especially given recent events." Dante cut straight to the point. "What do you know about the Bellinis?" "More than I'd like." Mitchell pulled out a tablet, showing us photographs of several men in expensive suits. "The Bellini family has been on our radar for years, but they're careful. Legitimate businesses, political connections, lawyers who know how to work the system. We've never been able to make anything stick. Until now." She swiped to another image, this one showing documents. 3 days ago, an anonymous package arrived at the FBI field office in New York. Inside were financial records, communication logs, and transportation manifests detailing the Bellini family's involvement in human trafficking operations across Europe and North America. The same operation Sofia was investigating. "So they're not the good guys," Elena said bitterly. "They're just as guilty as Castellano." "That's where it gets complicated." Mitchell leaned forward. "The Bellinis were involved in the trafficking operation, but only on the transportation side. They moved children from point A to point B, but they weren't involved in the selection process, the sales, or the placement. When they discovered what they were actually transporting, they tried to pull out. That's when Castellano threatened to expose their other illegal activities unless they continued." "Why should we believe that?" I asked. "Because the anonymous package came from them, along with an offer. They'll testify against everyone involved in the trafficking ring, provide evidence to convict dozens of people, and pay restitution to every victim we can locate. In exchange, they want immunity for the transportation charges and a guarantee that their other business interests won't be investigated." "It's a good deal, Isabella," Mitchell continued. "With their testimony and evidence, we can dismantle the entire network. Without it, we might only get the small players while the real architects disappear." "What do you think?" Dante asked quietly. "I think Sofia would want justice for every child who was stolen, sold, and trafficked. She'd want the people responsible to pay, even if it meant making deals with other criminals." I looked at Elena, who nodded slowly. "If this helps other victims, if it prevents other children from suffering the way we did, then we do it. But I want to meet with them first. I want to look them in the eye and make sure they're serious about making amends." "That can be arranged," Mitchell said, "but it would have to be soon. We're hearing chatter that other trafficking organizations are starting to worry about their exposure. If we're going to move, it has to be within the next week." "Where would we meet them?" "Private location, maximum security. They've suggested their estate in the Hamptons. Completely controlled environment, no possibility of outside interference." Elena and I exchanged glances. Another powerful family, another isolated location, another situation where we'd have to trust people who operated outside the law. But if it meant justice for Sofia and all the other victims, we had to try. "We'll do it," I said. "When?" "Tomorrow night. I'll send you the details." Mitchell stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Sofia Romano died trying to protect children she'd never met. The least we can do is honor that sacrifice by making sure her investigation leads to real justice." After she left, the three of us sat in silence for several minutes. The diner's ambient noise, clinking dishes, muffled conversations, the hiss of the coffee machine, seemed unnaturally loud. "We're really going to do this," Elena said finally. "Meet with Italian crime bosses and try to negotiate justice for trafficking victims." "It sounds insane when you say it like that." "I know," I replied. "But what's the alternative? Let Castellano's death be the end of it. Let all those children's suffering be meaningless. Let Sofia's investigation die with her." Elena nodded, resolve hardening her features. "We go tomorrow night. We look these people in the eye, and we make sure they understand that if they're lying to us, if this is some kind of trap, we'll spend the rest of our lives making them regret it." Dante's expression was unreadable. You both realized this could go very wrong. That we could be walking into a situation where all three of us end up dead. But you also realize it could go very right, I countered. That we could finally get the justice Sophia died fighting for. That we could prevent other families from being destroyed the way ours were. He was quiet for another moment, then reached across the table to take our hands. Tomorrow night, then. But we go prepared for anything, and we don't take any unnecessary risks. If something feels wrong, we leave immediately. Agreed. Elena and I said together. As we walked back to Dante's SUV, I found myself thinking about Sophia. About the scared little girl who'd become a brave woman, who'd married for love despite an arranged introduction, who died trying to protect children she'd never met. Tomorrow night, we'd find out whether her sacrifice had been worth it. Whether the evidence she'd gathered and the investigation she'd started would finally bring down the people who'd turned children into commodities. The drive back to the lodge was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts about what lay ahead. But for the first time since walking into that bar 3 weeks ago, I felt something like hope. Not because the danger was over, because it clearly wasn't, but because we were finally close to finishing what Sophia had started. Close to getting the justice she'd died fighting for. And whatever happened tomorrow night, we'd face it together. The three of us, united by love and loss and a shared commitment to making sure no other children suffered the way we had. Sophia would have been proud. The Bellini estate sprawled across 15 acres of pristine Hampton's coastline, its neoclassical architecture gleaming white against the dark November sky. As our car passed through the security gates, I counted at least 6 men positioned around the grounds, all wearing dark suits despite the casual setting. They moved with the same predatory grace I'd learned to recognize in Dante's people, professional violence barely concealed beneath civilized facades. Elena sat beside me in the back seat, her hands folded in her lap, but her knuckles white with tension. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress and pearls, wanting to look respectful but not intimidated. I'd chosen dark slacks and a blazer, professional enough for a business meeting but practical enough to run in if necessary. Dante rode in the passenger seat, his own tension evident in the set of his shoulders. He'd been unusually quiet during the drive, checking his phone constantly for updates from his security team. Alessandro and Vincent followed in a second vehicle, along with 2 other men whose names I didn't know but whose presence reassured me nonetheless. The main house was lit from within, warm lights spilling from tall windows onto manicured lawns. A circular driveway led to an impressive entrance, marble columns supporting a portico that could have belonged to a museum. As our car stopped, men emerged from the house to greet us. 3 of them, all middle-aged, all carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to power. The one in the center was tall and silver-haired, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Romano," he said as Dante exited the vehicle. "I am Vincenzo Bellini. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Behind me, the 2 ladies I presume are Miss Martinez and Miss Moreau. Dante's response was carefully neutral. "Mr. Bellini, as promised, we're here to listen to what you have to say. But I want to be clear from the start, this isn't a negotiation. It's a fact-finding mission." "Of course." Bellini's smile widened fractionally. "Please, come inside. We have much to discuss." The interior of the house was exactly what I'd expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. But it was also surprisingly warm, lived in rather than just displayed. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece. Children's toys were scattered in one corner, and the smell of something delicious drifted from what I assumed was the kitchen. Bellini led us into a sitting room dominated by a massive fireplace. Leather chairs had been arranged in a circle, neutral territory where no one had the advantage of sitting behind a desk. He gestured for us to sit, then took his own chair, his 2 companions flanking him like bookends. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Wine? Something stronger?" "We're fine," Dante said curtly. "Let's get to the point." Bellini nodded, his expression growing serious. "Very well. I assume Agent Mitchell briefed you on our situation. Our family became involved with Castellano's operation 5 years ago, initially believing we were providing legitimate transportation services for international adoption agencies. When we discovered the true nature of what we were moving, we attempted to sever ties. Castellano threatened to expose our other business interests to federal authorities unless we continued. That's very convenient, Elena said, speaking for the first time. You expect us to believe you had no idea you were trafficking children. Bellini's gaze shifted to her, and I saw something that might have been genuine remorse flicker across his features. Miss Morrow, I cannot imagine what you must have suffered as a child. What was done to you, to your sister, to all those children, it is unforgivable. Our involvement, even unwilling involvement, brings shame to my family name. But yes, I expect you to believe it because it's the truth. One of the other men leaned forward. My name is Antonio Bellini, Vincenzo's brother. I was the one who first suspected something was wrong with Castellano's operation. The children we were transporting, they didn't look like typical adoptees. They were scared, traumatized, often bearing signs of abuse or neglect. When I started asking questions, Castellano became evasive, then threatening. So you investigated, I said. You found out what was really happening. Antonio nodded grimly. We discovered that Hope Foundation was a front for one of the largest child trafficking operations in North America and Europe. Hundreds of children, stolen from families or taken from state care under false pretenses, then sold to the highest bidders. Some went to couples who genuinely believed they were adopting legally. Others, his face darkened, went to people with darker purposes. That's when we tried to pull out. Vincenzo continued. We're criminals, Miss Martinez. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. But we're not monsters. Children are sacred. Families are sacred. What Castellano was doing, it violated every principle we hold dear. So why didn't you go to the authorities? Dante asked. Why continue working with him if you found his operation so repugnant? Because he had evidence of our other activities, Antonio said bluntly. Shipping manifests, financial records, communications that would have sent half our family to prison for decades. He used that leverage to force our continued cooperation. Elena leaned forward in her chair. You could have gone to witness protection, started new lives, clean lives, instead of continuing to transport stolen children, and abandon our responsibility to our community, our employees, the hundreds of families who depend on our legitimate businesses for their livelihoods, Vincenzo replied. You're asking us to judge decisions made under duress, Miss Morrow. Easy to do from the outside. Much harder when you're living with the consequences. So what changed, I asked. What made you finally decide to act against Castellano? Your wife's investigation, Dante, Antonio said quietly. When Sofia Romano started asking questions, started connecting dots that Castellano thought were safely buried, he became desperate. He contacted us 6 weeks ago with a new demand. Not just transportation services, but elimination services. He wanted us to kill the witnesses to his operation. Starting with Miss Martinez and Miss Morrow. That's when we refused, Vincenzo said. Whatever leverage he held over us, it wasn't worth becoming accessories to murder. We'd already compromised our principles enough. Elena was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. I reached over and took her hand, offering what comfort I could. The weight of what we were hearing, the confirmation that Sophia had died because she'd gotten too close to the truth, was almost unbearable. So you killed him, I said, stating the obvious. You executed Castellano in Prague. We did, Vincenzo confirmed without hesitation. It was the only way to protect you and ensure that his operation could never be rebuilt. His death also served as a message to other trafficking organizations that this kind of business will not be tolerated. And now you want immunity, Dante said. Protection from prosecution in exchange for your testimony. We want the opportunity to make amends, Antonio corrected. Yes, we want legal protection for our family's transportation activities. But more than that, we want to help dismantle the entire network. We have records, names, locations, financial information that could lead to hundreds of arrests and convictions. Vincenzo pulled out a leather portfolio, setting it on the table between us. This contains everything we've compiled over the past 5 years. Client lists, payment schedules, transportation routes, safe houses. Every person who facilitated, funded, or benefited from Castellano's operation. I looked at the portfolio, then back at the two brothers. What's to stop you from just walking away once you get your immunity deal? What guarantee do we have that you'll follow through on your promises? You have our word, Vincenzo said simply. I understand that may not mean much to you, given our involvement in this horror. But in our world, our word is our bond. We swear on the graves of our parents, on the lives of our children, that we will see this through to the end. Elena wiped her eyes, her voice stronger when she spoke again. I want to see the records. I want to know which children they show, whether any of the other kids from Santa Agnes are listed. Of course. Antonio gestured toward the portfolio. Take all the time you need. For the next 2 hours, we pored over the documents. The scope of the operation was staggering. Not just Santa Agnes, but dozens of facilities across the country, all feeding children into Castellano's network. Foster homes, group homes, even some legitimate orphanages that had been infiltrated and corrupted. I found my own name in the records, listed as a potential candidate for overseas placement before my adoption by the Collins family. Elena's name was there too, along with the details of her sale to the Moros. But worse than our own entries were the hundreds of others. Children who disappeared without a trace, reduced to line items in a ledger of human misery. This is enough, Elena said finally, closing the last folder. This is enough to convict everyone involved. The question is whether we can trust you to honor your agreement. There's one way to know for sure, I said, an idea forming. You said you want to make amends. Prove it. Use your resources to help the survivors. Fund counseling services, reunion efforts, legal support for families seeking justice. Don't just testify and disappear. Stay involved in the solution. Vincenzo and Antonio exchanged glances. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Martinez? A foundation, properly funded, properly run, dedicated to helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. You provide the initial capital and ongoing support. We provide oversight to make sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. Think of it as community service with accountability. Dante was watching me with something like pride. You want to turn criminals into philanthropists. I want to turn criminals into partners in justice, I corrected. Sophia died fighting for those children. If the Bellinis are serious about making amends, they can help us continue that fight. The negotiations continued late into the night. By the time we left the estate, we had the framework for an agreement that would see the Bellini family provide testimony against the trafficking network in exchange for limited immunity, plus a commitment to fund victim services for the next decade. It wasn't perfect. It meant working with criminals, compromising with people who'd facilitated terrible crimes. But it was pragmatic, and more importantly, it was what Sophia would have wanted. Justice for the victims, protection for future children, and accountability for everyone involved. The trials began 6 months later. With the Bellini testimony and Sophia's evidence, prosecutors secured convictions against 47 people involved in the trafficking network. Castellano was dead, but his accomplices weren't. They received sentences ranging from 20 years to life, without parole. Elena and I testified at multiple trials, sharing our experiences and helping juries understand the human cost of the crimes being prosecuted. It was brutal, reliving those memories in public, but it was also cathartic. Our pain finally had purpose. The foundation we'd proposed became reality. Hope renewed, using money recovered from Castellano's seized assets combined with the Bellini's contributions. The mission was simple but crucial, helping victims of child trafficking reconnect with biological families when possible, providing therapy and resources when reunion wasn't feasible. I'd thrown myself into the work with the same intensity one brought to veterinary medicine. Maybe it was guilt over all the children I hadn't saved as a kid, or maybe it was honoring Sophia's memory. Probably both. Dante had started therapy 2 months ago, finally confronting the guilt and grief he'd carried since Sophia's death. I went with him sometimes, working through my own childhood trauma, my abandonment issues, my fear of losing people I loved. It wasn't easy. Some days the weight of everything felt crushing. But we carried it together, and that made all the difference. Come on, I said, finishing my coffee. We have somewhere to be before the clinic opens. Dante understood immediately. We drove to the cemetery in Queens, the small plot where Sophia was buried beneath a simple headstone. I'd visited once before, right after returning from Paris, but this time felt different. This time, I wasn't coming to report on a mission completed. I was coming to share a life transformed. The morning was cold but clear, autumn leaves carpeting the ground in shades of rust and gold. I knelt beside the grave, placing the white lilies I'd brought, Soph's favorite flower that I'd learned about from Dante's stories. "Hey, Soph," I said softly. "It's Isabella. I brought Dante with me this time. We have some things to tell you." Dante crouched beside me, his hand finding mine. Together, we told her about Elena, about the reunion that had meant everything, about the foundation helping other children, 12 reunifications with more coming, about the clinic opening today, dedicated to healing creatures who couldn't heal themselves, the way Soph had tried to heal broken children. "I hope you're proud," I whispered, touching both pendants at my throat, hers and mine reunited. "I hope wherever you are, you know that your death wasn't meaningless. That what you started, we're continuing. That Elena knows she was loved, even by a sister she never met." Dante was quiet for a long moment, then spoke directly to the headstone. "I'm sorry I didn't see what you were doing. Sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. But I promise you, I'll protect Isabella the way I failed to protect you. And I'll make sure every child we can save through the foundation knows they matter, the way you believe they mattered." We sat there in the peace of the cemetery, 3 people connected by blood oaths and wedding vows and shared purpose. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been restless since childhood. Belonging. Not to a place or a person, though I loved both the clinic and Dante deeply, but belonging to something larger, a purpose that extended beyond myself. Helping others the way Soph had tried to help, healing wounds both literal and figurative, being part of a cycle of recovery and hope. When we finally stood to leave, Dante pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my hair. "I love you, Isabella Martinez. Every stubborn, independent, brilliant part of you. I love you too, Dante Romano. Even the parts of you that scare me sometimes." He laughed, a sound I'd learned to treasure because it was rare and genuine. As we walked back to the car, I took one last look at Sophia's grave. The sun caught the pendants at my throat, making them shine. 2 halves of a heart, carried by 2 women who'd survived impossible childhoods and fought to protect others from the same fate. Soph's fight had ended too soon, but mine was just beginning, and I wouldn't face it alone.